My name is Maya. I'm 29 years old, single, and a corporate lawyer specializing in real estate litigation. I live in Atlanta now, but the house I bought at 24 was in Charleston, my childhood hometown. It wasn't flashy. 3 bedrooms, modest yard, a lemon tree I planted myself. But it was mine. Every tile, every hinge, every nail. I paid for it with overtime, ramen dinners, and the stubborn belief that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. But apparently, that wasn't enough. Because one afternoon, as I was drafting contracts in my corner office, my assistant pinged me. "Maya, something urgent from the Charleston County Recorder's office just came in." My stomach dropped. I clicked the attachment. It was a scanned deed transfer. My house. The title had been switched. The listed owners? Dropped ball. Ronald and Elena Watkins. My parents. I thought it was a mistake. It had to be. Some clerical mix-up. I called the county office immediately. The clerk was polite but firm. The documents were signed and notarized. Looks legitimate. But I didn't sign anything, I said. "Ma'am," he sighed, "there's a signature on file." I asked him to email it to me. When it came through, I stared at the digital scan in stunned silence. It was my signature. Copied, cloned, but not mine. Not written by my hand. I'd been in San Francisco the entire month it was dated. I knew exactly what had happened, because there were only 2 people who had access to my old personal files back in Charleston. People I once trusted. My parents. They still had keys. They still had copies of my tax returns, leases, even an old passport. And they had motive. 3 months ago, they told me their house was at risk of foreclosure. My dad lost his second job. My mom's pension had dried up. I'd offered to help, send some money, review their loan documents, but they said no. Too proud. Too traditional. Apparently, stealing from their daughter was more acceptable. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I printed the document and stared at it. Not because I couldn't believe it, but because deep down, a part of me always knew. My parents loved me conditionally. As long as I played the role of the grateful daughter. As long as I didn't make more money than my brothers. As long as I didn't buy a house before they paid off theirs. And now? Mama Heviga. Now I was a threat. So they took what was mine. And they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd let it go. But I'm not the same girl who begged them to be proud of her college acceptance letter. I'm not the girl who sent money home without being asked. I'm not the girl who confused silence with peace. I'm Maya. And I'm a real estate lawyer. They wanted to play games? Fine. But I play with contracts, loopholes, and foreclosure law. And I never lose. I took the first flight out of Atlanta the next morning. No text, no warning. Just rage and clarity in equal measure. My house was still there, of course. Lights on, curtains drawn, my mom's favorite wind chime hanging from the porch. When I stepped onto the driveway, I saw it. My dad's old truck, my mom's sedan, both parked like they owned the place. Because now, on paper, they did. I rang the doorbell. No response. I used the spare key, still hidden under the 3rd brick on the left. Walked into my own house like a stranger. And there they were, my parents, sitting at the kitchen table with mugs of coffee like it was just another Wednesday. My mom froze mid-sip. My dad set his mug down slowly. "Maya," my mom said, voice too light, "you should have called." I closed the door behind me and stayed standing. "You switched the title on my house," I said. Silence. "Forged my signature," I added, voice steady. "Used a fake notary stamp. And filed it with the county." My dad sighed like I was the one making things difficult. "You weren't even living here," he said. "We thought." "You thought what?" I cut in. "That you'd just take it?" My mom stood up, palms out. "We didn't take anything. We're family. We were drowning, Maya. We had no choice." "There's always a choice," I snapped. "You just didn't like the one where you had to ask for help." "We didn't want charity," my dad muttered. "It's not charity," I said coldly. "It's respect. It's trust. It's the bare minimum." My mom's voice trembled. "We raised you, Maya. We gave you everything. We thought maybe you'd understand. Understand fraud? I said. Understand that you stole from your own daughter? The room went still. No one said it out loud, but it was there. The guilt, the entitlement, the ugly mix of shame and justification that clung to the air like smoke. You wouldn't let us mortgage it in your name, my dad said quietly. So we did what we had to do. I stared at them. Where's the notary? We had someone, my mom said, eyes darting. I pulled out my phone and hit record. My dad stood abruptly. No, you don't get to do this. You already did this, I said. Now I'm doing it legally. I walked out, got into my rental car, and called the one person who always answered when the lines got blurry. Delia, my best friend and forensic handwriting expert. I need you to testify, I said. She didn't ask why. She just said, send me the documents. By noon, I had filed a civil suit for fraudulent conveyance. By 3 o'clock, the county clerk flagged the title as contested. And by 5 o'clock, I made a call to the Charleston foreclosure office, not to report mine, but to pull the records on theirs. The house they still lived in? 3 months behind on mortgage. Eligible for auction in 45 days. I sat in my rental car, parked outside my stolen house, and smiled for the first time in 2 days. They wanted my home? Fine, because now I was going to own theirs. The auction date for their house was April 28th, 42 days from the moment I filed my lawsuit, and I planned to be the highest bidder, quietly, legally, and with a front row seat to their downfall. But first, I needed to clean up my own name, because even though the title to my house was flagged as disputed, it didn't erase the fake transfer. I had to prove fraud, so I gathered everything. My flight receipts from the week of the forged signature, my work calendar showing I was logged into a deposition 2,000 miles away, photos of me time-stamped in San Francisco, and, most importantly, Delia's report. She compared the signature on the deed to 10 samples of my real signature, from leases, my bar application, even old birthday cards. Her conclusion was damning. It's traced, she said. A near match, but with pressure inconsistencies. Someone copied your old signature from a scanned lease. I nodded. I know exactly which one they used. It was the lease I had co-signed with them 5 years ago, back when I helped them refinance, back when I trusted them. The notary they used? Shalom. Fake. The stamp? Shalom. Expired license. Filed by a third party who worked at a now-defunct paralegal office. It took me less than 72 hours to unravel their entire scheme, and every thread led back to desperation. They hadn't just taken my house, they had planned it, researched it, executed it, and smiled in my kitchen like I was the unreasonable one. On day 4, I served them with legal notice, fraudulent conveyance, forgery, civil damages. My mom called me. Her voice was shaking. Maya, you're suing your own parents? No, I said. I'm suing 2 people who committed felony fraud against me. The fact that you birthed me is irrelevant. You're being cruel. No, I said calmly. Cruel was stealing the roof over my head. This is just fair. She sobbed quietly before hanging up. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. Because people who love you don't forge your name. They don't sign over your home and pray you don't notice. They don't justify it with, you weren't using it anyway. I was done being the obedient daughter who smiled through betrayal. That Saturday, I flew back to Atlanta and walked into the courthouse in a Navy suit and heels sharp enough to cut glass. My statement to the judge was simple. My parents committed a calculated act of fraud. I'm not here to ruin them. I'm here to reclaim what's mine and ensure they never do it to anyone else. The judge ordered a temporary injunction on the property. My parents couldn't sell, lease, or modify anything until the case was resolved. That same night, I made my final move. I submitted a sealed bid to buy their house at auction. Full cash offer. No contingencies. 30% above estimated market value. Enough to beat any competitor. Because if they wanted a house so badly, they were going to get one, with me as their landlord, and a contract they'd actually have to sign. April 28th came faster than I expected. The Charleston foreclosure auction wasn't glamorous. A folding table, 2 clerks, half a dozen local investors whispering numbers, and me, standing in a gray coat and sunglasses, anonymous in plain sight. The auctioneer read off the address. My childhood home, 2 stories, faded white siding, the porch swing I once painted with my dad. Opening bid, $86,000. Someone to my left raised a hand. 87, another man called. 90, came a third. I raised my hand at 95. A pause, then silence. The others looked at me, curious. Sold, the clerk called. To bidder 221. That was me. I signed the paperwork. Paid on the spot. Just like that, I own my parents' home. The same one they told me was not my business. The same one they refused help on. They hadn't been at the auction. They had no idea what was coming. Until 4 days later, when I showed up on their porch with 2 things. A packet of legal documents and a locksmith. My mom opened the door in a robe. She blinked twice, confused. Maya? I handed her the envelope. This is your new lease. The house now belongs to my holding company. Her mouth dropped. You bought it? I nodded once. Full control, new deed, updated title, clear chain of ownership. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. 12-month lease, market rent, $2,650 per month, due on the 1st, late fee after 5 days. No exceptions, I said. My dad appeared behind her, face red. You can't do this. I already did, I said. You'd make your own parents pay rent? He snapped. I didn't blink. You stole my house? I said softly. You forged a deed and faked a signature. And now you're surprised I'm treating you like tenants instead of family? You're heartless, my mom whispered. No, I said. I'm just done being the only one who follows the rules. The locksmith stepped forward. If you don't sign the lease, we'll have to rekey the doors. My dad looked like he might explode. Instead, he stormed into the living room. My mom followed. They argued behind the thin walls for 10 minutes before returning. She signed. He signed. Both of them, right there on the porch, with hands trembling and faces flushed. I initialed each page calmly, then handed them their copy. Welcome to your new lease agreement, I said. Oh, and I'll need post-dated checks for the next 3 months. You're already 2 payments behind with the bank. That won't fly with me. My mom opened her mouth to speak. I held up a hand. This isn't personal anymore, it's business. The same way you treated me when you stole what I worked for. I turned and left without another word. In the driveway, I sat in my car, hands still steady. For the first time, I had all the power, not out of revenge, but out of justice. They wanted to play dirty? I just played smarter. And the game had only begun. The first rent check arrived 5 days late. No apology. Just a handwritten envelope with a faint coffee stain on the corner and barely legible penmanship that screamed resentment. $2,650. Postmarked 2 days past the due date. My assistant, Naomi, looked at it and raised an eyebrow. You charging the late fee? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Naomi grinned. I'll draft the notice. I forwarded the late fee clause. $150 after 5 days, $25 for each additional day. Standard, legal, unemotional. I mailed the notice with a polite cover letter. 2 days later, my mom called. Maya, this is ridiculous. I stayed quiet. You're really charging your own mother a late fee? I responded calmly. You're my tenants now. You signed the lease. She didn't like that. What happened to family? You forged a deed, I replied. That was your idea of family. Click. She hung up. I didn't call back. Instead, I continued the fraud investigation on my house. The temporary injunction held. They couldn't touch the property. But that didn't stop my dad from parking his truck in the driveway like he still lived there. One of the neighbors, M's, Dolores, called me. He comes by every few days, Maya. Just sits there, doesn't get out. I thanked her. Didn't bother calling him. I already knew what that was about. Regret. But regret doesn't rewrite title history. It doesn't erase forged documents. And it certainly doesn't excuse stealing your child's home because you didn't want to admit you were broke. The court hearing for the fraudulent transfer was scheduled for June 12th. My attorney was confident Delia's report was airtight. The signature discrepancy was glaring under professional scrutiny. On May 30th, my mom left a voicemail. Maya, we're struggling. Your dad's health isn't great. The rent is a lot. We just need a little grace. I listened to the whole message while sipping a protein shake after Pilates. Then I deleted it. Because here's what they didn't understand. I had offered help before they stole from me. I had offered support before they lied. They wanted control without accountability. They wanted to live in houses they didn't earn, under roofs they didn't pay for, while calling me selfish for saying no. But no more. That month, they paid on time. Barely. I deposited the checks, sent the receipts. No warmth, no confrontation, just business. I stopped checking their social media, stopped answering passive-aggressive texts from distant cousins, asking why I was treating my parents like strangers. Because strangers don't steal your identity. Family doesn't fake your signature. People who love you don't burn bridges and expect you to rebuild them for free. I wasn't being cold. I was being fair. They set the terms. I just held them to it. And in 2 more weeks, the judge would hear everything. They thought this was punishment. But they hadn't seen the real consequence yet. Because when the gavel falls, they won't just lose control of my house. They'll lose the illusion that they ever had control over me at all. June 12th, Charleston County Courthouse. 9 a.m. sharp. I wore a dark gray suit and flats instead of heels. I didn't want height. I wanted stability. When I walked into the courtroom, my parents were already seated. My dad avoided my eyes. My mom gave me a tight, sad smile. I offered nothing back. Not out of spite. But because this wasn't family therapy, it was civil litigation. And the evidence was already stacked. Delia was sworn in first. She spoke like she was reading off a medical chart. Precise. Neutral. Deadly. This signature was traced from a prior lease agreement. The pen pressure indicates hesitation. There are loop inconsistencies and spatial mismatches when compared to authentic signatures. The judge asked a few questions. Delia answered them all without blinking. Next came the county clerk. He confirmed the notary listed had lost their license 3 years prior. The stamp used was invalid. Then I was called up. I laid out the timeline. My original deed filed and recorded 5 years ago. The forged deed filed while I was provably in San Francisco. My digital calendar, time-stamped photos, and plane tickets. I didn't embellish, didn't raise my voice, just facts. Cold and devastating. When my parents' lawyer tried to cross-examine me, it was weak. Would you say you've ever helped your parents financially before? Yes, I replied. And would you say you're financially capable of supporting them now? Yes. But you didn't offer help during their crisis? I did, I said. They declined, and then they stole from me. The judge nodded slowly. My parents didn't testify. Their lawyer claimed it would be too emotional. Translation, they had no defense. At 11:43 a.m., the judge made his ruling. The deed transfer is declared fraudulent. The title shall be returned to the plaintiff. All forged documents are null and void. I didn't smile, didn't cry, just nodded once. It was over. The house was mine again, officially. 2 hours later, I filed a formal trespass warning against my dad for loitering on the property. He wouldn't be able to sit in the driveway anymore. The next day, I sent a certified letter to my parents. New terms for their lease. Rent increased to $3,000 effective next cycle. Justified by local comps and market rate. I included maintenance logs, repair estimates, and the rental clause they signed without reading closely. The clause that said I could adjust rent after 3 months with 30 days' notice. My mom called. I didn't answer. She left a message that started calm and ended with sobbing. We're your parents, Maya. Please, we're drowning. I listened, then pressed delete. No reply. They wanted a transaction. Now they had one. They made me a landlord. Now I was acting like one. Not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. Because the girl who used to beg for love from her family? Mabel. She didn't live here anymore. Only Maya did. And Maya didn't negotiate with thieves. I hired a property manager. Her name was Tasha, and she was ruthlessly professional. She didn't know my parents personally. Didn't care that they used to pack my school lunches or attend my soccer games. She cared about late payments, clause violations, and routine inspections. On July 3rd, Tasha did the first inspection. She texted me photos of the living room cluttered with unopened mail, the broken screen door, the leaky kitchen faucet. They're 2 months behind on minor maintenance, she said. Want me to write it up? Yes, I replied. Follow the lease. 3 days later, a notice arrived at their door. Failure to report maintenance issues. Lease violation. 7 days to remedy. My mom emailed me at 2 a.m. The subject line just read, seriously. In the body, she wrote, "You're having strangers inspect our house now? You've made your point. Can we please go back to how things were?" How things were. She meant the part where I paid quietly, and they controlled everything. Where they could rewrite reality and expect me to play along. I didn't respond. Tasha sent a follow-up email, outlining next steps for noncompliance. The silence that followed was deafening. Until the rent came due again. And this time? They didn't pay at all. No check, no excuse, just absence. Tasha called it before I did. They're going to test you. See if you'll blink. I didn't. On day 6 of non-payment, I had Tasha post the pay or quit notice on their front door. They had 72 hours. My phone rang that night. My dad. His name flashed across the screen. I hadn't heard his voice since court. I let it go to voicemail. Listened to it an hour later. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice low and shaking. "You think this makes you better than us? We're still your parents, Maya. We made mistakes, but this is cruel." I stared at the ceiling. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Because here's what he still didn't understand. This wasn't about winning. It was about finally being done. With the emotional manipulation. The entitlement masked as family values. The double standards where their mistakes were just mistakes. But mine were betrayal. They thought I owed them loyalty no matter what. But loyalty isn't owed. It's earned. And they had lost that right the day they forged my name. Tasha called the next morning. "They paid," she said, "in cash. And your mom cried when I handed her the receipt." I didn't flinch. "Add a record to the file," I said. I hung up and poured myself a cup of tea. Chamomile? No sugar. It tasted like calm. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I was just following the rules they wrote when they made this about paperwork instead of love. They started this with a forged document. I was finishing it with legal compliance. And I still hadn't raised my voice. Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just sends rent notices with your name at the top. It was mid-August when the family reunion invite arrived. From my cousin Alina. A backyard barbecue, nothing fancy. She added a note at the bottom. "I hope you'll come, Maya. Everyone keeps asking about you." Everyone? I already knew what that meant. My parents had probably spun a version of events where I was ungrateful, cold, or too rich for family. But I wasn't hiding. I had just stopped entertaining lies. Still, I RSVP'd yes. Not to prove anything, just to walk in and show that I didn't shrink. Not anymore. The day of the reunion, I wore a simple emerald green dress. No designer label. No overstatement. But unmistakably composed. When I arrived, the first person I saw was my Aunt Lydia. She blinked in surprise. "Maya, you came?" I smiled. Why wouldn't I? She looked like she wanted to say something else but didn't. That was fine. Let the discomfort hang. Let them feel it. I got a soda from the cooler, made small talk with a few cousins. And then I saw them. My parents. Sitting under the white tent near the grill. My mom spotted me first. She stood, hesitant. My dad stayed seated. "Maya," she said, walking over. I didn't move. She looked thinner than before. Eyes a little darker, worn, but still carrying that same tone. Half apology, half control. "Can we talk?" I nodded once. We stepped a few feet away. She folded her arms. I didn't know how far this would go. I raised an eyebrow. "You forged a deed and filed it with the county. It was always going to go far." She swallowed. "I thought we could fix it before it exploded. We were scared." "You were proud," I corrected. "Scared people ask for help. Proud people steal and justify it." Tears welled in her eyes. "We didn't know how to ask you. Your success. It made us feel small." I blinked. Finally, the real truth. Not the excuses. Not the manipulations. Just the insecurity that drove them to betrayal. "That was never my intention," I said quietly. "But you made your choices, and now I've made mine." She nodded slowly. "So this is how it is now? Tenants. Contracts. Cold rules." "No," I said. "This is how it's always been. You just didn't notice until I stopped cushioning your consequences." She looked down. "I miss you," I exhaled. "I miss who I thought you were." We stood there for a moment, two women tied by blood, pulled apart by silence and signatures. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, but I turned to walk away, not angrily, just peacefully. Because some endings don't come with slammed doors. Just a quiet realization that you've finally outgrown needing someone's permission to exist. When I left the reunion, no one stopped me. No whispers followed, only a few glances. And one distant voice from behind me. "Is it true?" someone asked. "She owns both houses?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Because yes, it's true. And they were finally learning it the only way they'd understand. By paying rent. September came with early rain and cooler mornings. I was reviewing contracts in my office when Naomi buzzed in. "Tasha's here. She says it's important." Tasha walked in holding a manila folder. She placed it gently on my desk. "They've missed the rent again. 32 days late." I nodded. "What's the excuse this time?" "None," she said. "Just silence." She slid a photo across the desk. A shot of the house. A foreclosure notice tacked to the front door. Not from me, from the utility company. They hadn't paid their electric bill. I sighed and leaned back. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even disappointed. I was tired. Tired of pretending the lease would fix the relationship. Tired of pretending they ever wanted reconciliation more than control. Tasha sat down. "So, do you want to file for eviction?" It would be easy. 3 months late was more than enough legal grounds. But I hesitated. Not because I was having second thoughts, but because I was finally seeing everything clearly. Evicting them wouldn't teach them anything, it would just let them run from the mess they made. I picked up a pen and wrote a new letter, not from my holding company, from me, Maya Watkins. It was 1 page, plain, direct. Effective immediately, your rent will be suspended. You may remain in the house rent-free for 6 months, under one condition. You must sign a formal relinquishment of all financial ties to me. No more requests. No more obligations. No more guilt. We will no longer be landlord and tenant. And we will no longer be family. I signed it and sealed it. Tasha looked stunned. "You're letting them off the hook?" "No," I said. "I'm setting myself free." That weekend, I drove down to Charleston myself. Hand-delivered the letter. My mom opened the door, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She saw the envelope and backed away. "What is this now?" "Read it," I said. She did. Her hands trembled again, but this time not from fear, from understanding. "You're cutting us off." "I'm letting you go," I said. She looked at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. But maybe, finally, she was seeing who I had always been. My dad didn't come to the door, but I saw the curtain shift. He was listening. She folded the paper and asked, "And after 6 months? You can move, or you can buy the house back, but I won't be your landlord, and I won't be your fallback. And if we sign, you'll get peace. Same as me." She nodded slowly. "I'll talk to him." I walked away for the last time, not as their daughter, not as their landlord, but as a woman who had reclaimed every piece of herself and left nothing behind that wasn't hers to carry. The letter was signed 2 days later. Notarized. No theatrics, no apology, just ink on paper. A full relinquishment of financial ties. They accepted the 6-month rent-free term with no expectation of further support. Naomi handed me the signed document with quiet respect. "They really did it." I nodded. They did. It felt less like a victory and more like the end of a contract I never agreed to in the first place. One where I was expected to always give more, always bend, always fix. Now the terms were finally mutual. Nothing further owed. Tasha removed them from the tenant ledger that afternoon. And just like that, I was no longer their landlord. Not their safety net, not their emotional accountant, not their daughter in any functional sense. Just Maya, a woman who built her life from scratch, only to have it nearly stolen by the very people who once said they loved her no matter what. I flew back to Atlanta and stepped into my home, my real home, with its quiet bookshelves and the scent of lemon balm in the air. I made tea, sat on the balcony, watched the sun lower itself behind the skyline. No texts came through, no guilt-trip voicemails, no rent notices, no overdue calls, no silence I had to interpret. Just peace. And in that stillness, something unexpected bloomed. Not regret, not relief, just clarity. I didn't need them to change. I only needed them to stop costing me who I was. For years, I believed I could earn their love by being useful. That if I just helped enough, succeeded enough, stayed quiet enough, they'd see me, respect me, love me the way I loved them. But now I understood. They weren't built to love unconditionally, only transactionally, and I had stopped offering terms. I opened my laptop and scrolled through old photos, family trips, graduations, smiles I used to think were proof of something real. Now I saw them for what they were, snapshots of a performance I was always backstage for. I clicked delete, one folder at a time, not out of spite, but because sometimes, to heal, you have to stop rehearsing the version of the past where things were better than they were. That night, I updated my will, left both properties to a housing nonprofit for women recovering from financial abuse. No names of blood relatives, no second chances to rewrite the past, just clean pages for women like me, women who had to learn that love doesn't come with strings, and that home isn't where you're born, it's where you're free. So if you ask me now, was it cruel? No, it was necessary. I didn't burn bridges. I bought the land they stood on. And I built boundaries. Strong, legal, unbreakable. Because in the end, I didn't just get my house back, I got myself back. And this time, I'm not for sale. What do you think about Maya's decision? Was she too harsh? Or was this the only way to truly protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories about complicated family.